Good morning, everybody. I'm Richard Long. Today we're going to talk about the anatomy and flight characteristics of an arrow. Anybody here seen Robin Hood growing up? Yeah. Everybody remember that scene where he's doing the archery competition and get the love of his life, and that evil man comes behind him, bends his arrow, and starts flipping through the air and inevitably hits the target? I'm going to explain to you today how that is a complete lie. I hate to ruin your childhood, but we're going to get into the anatomy and flight characteristics of an arrow, and it's going to explain on how that is actually impossible. Right? Justification, why you need to know this. So the Archery Trade Association did a survey in 2014, and they explained that over 21.6 million Americans actually shoot archery nowadays. That's a lot of people out there. To give you an example, that is about a 1 in 6 person that you will find in this room that actually shoots archery, whether it's competition for hunting or for recreation itself. We're going to get into the anatomy of an arrow. Who here has ever shot an arrow, bow and arrow before? All right, quite a few of you have. So you should be vaguely familiar on what the actual anatomy is. The arrow itself is made up of a nock, which is located at the end. This is the end point here. Fletching, which is also known as the feathering for common terms. The shaft of it, you have an insert and you have a point. As depicted by this image up here on the screen, this is it broken down into different sections. The variations of how an arrow is comprised of differs between the shooters themselves. The nocks are generally the same. Its purpose in life is just to attach itself to the string of the bow. Some shooters prefer neons versus typical black and white notches. Some of them have LED lights that light up. Some of them even have Bluetooth, so they can follow their arrow as they shoot it. These are higher end ones. They're about $30 per one of them. They're very expensive. Do not recommend it. From there, you have your fletchings. Your fletchings can composite of 2 different types. You have your feather fletchings, which are just for recurve bows, and you have your plastic or rubberized fletchings, which is commonly for your compound bows. You have your shaft. Your shaft is either going to be composite, carbon composite, it's going to be wood, or it's going to be aluminum. Aluminum has they only use for a small period of time. It's mainly used by just recurve shooters itself. Wood could be done by either compound or recurve bows, but commonly known as your carbon composite shaft arrows is what you're going to be shooting for both recurve and composite bows. The type of shaft that you're going to use depends on you. I personally recommend the carbon composite ones. They're very more flexible, they're more durable, they're very lightweight. The only issue with them is they do not last as long as your typical aluminum or wood ones would. Your inserts, they're very common throughout. There's only 2 types out there. All they do is they just hold your tip. Your tip, the one I have on here now is just a field point, right? And this is for target practice or small game, such as rabbits or squirrels or anything of that nature. You have your broadheads, and they vary from different size, different brands, all the way to take down a moose if you would have. That's the basic anatomy of it. Now that we described the anatomy on it, we're going to talk about the flight characteristics. The flight characteristics are very simple. We want something that has a lot of force behind it to go as fast, as straight as possible. Newton's law, as he says, an object will stay at rest or stay in a moving force until an abrupt force is acted upon it. This is key when it comes to an arrow. The arrow is at rest as it sits in your bow. When you draw it back and you release it, you're putting an abrupt force behind it to draw it forward. As anything with any type of weight, what is it naturally going to do? It's naturally going to want to bend and flex as it comes off of your arrow. With your carbon type shafts, you have a number on here. This is a 350. They range all the way up to 600, all the way down to 200. And what they do is they tell you the stiffness of the shaft. The stiffer the shaft, the more straight it's going to, the less flexibility it's going to go as it shoots off your arrow. You also have the balancing point of the shaft. It's called front of center. Anything that has any type of length needs to have a balancing point that is semi in the middle. If you're using feathered fletchings, your balancing point automatically shifts 13% more forward of your arrow than if you were to use your standard rubberized fletchings. If you have too much weight on the front versus less weight on the back, your arrow is naturally going to want to dip down, and vice versa if you have too much weight on the other side. So the more center balance that you have, the more balance it will ride out, and the more straight it will shoot as you shoot your arrow. From there, you have the shooter's disadvantage. Right? We as humans make mistakes just in general. When we talk about mistakes on how we shoot our arrow is, are we using the same sight picture? Do we set up the bow properly to it? Are we holding the bow in the same manner as we did last time? Two major disadvantages just with the flight characteristics of the arrow is the rest set up properly for the shooter. 9 times out of 10, the rest is either too far left, right, up, or down, so you won't have the same shooting pattern as before because the way the arrow is not completely level with the way you're trying to shoot it. The other disadvantage is the way we hold it. As we draw back, we don't always draw straight back. We may cock it to the side, cock it up or down. A lot of mistakes people make is they want to bring the arrow, the bow, to the target versus bring your body to the target by keeping the same sight aperture. So if I have a target that I'm shooting downhill, I don't want to bring it down because now my bow has just went from a level, my arrow has just went from a level sight to a pointed down nature. Now it has the possibility of toppling head over end. Now, typically how we would do this is just shift at the hips, that way we keep the same sight aperture on the way down. And all this you can find in the Mechanics of an Arrow 101, and this is by Daniel Rudman, who devised all this information up for us. If you guys have no questions, we're going to jump into the conclusion, which we have talked about the anatomy and flight characteristics of an arrow. So hopefully you guys take this information next time hunting season opens, which is here 2 weeks, and this should help you get your next big kill. Thank you very much.